A Study in Scarlet by Arthur Conan Doyle. This is part 2 of the book, chapter 1, titled On the Great Alkali Plain. In the central portion of the great North American continent there lies an arid and repulsive desert, which for many a long year served as a barrier against the advance of civilization. From the Sierra Nevada to Nebraska, and from the Yellowstone River in the north to the Colorado upon the south, is a region of desolation and silence. Nor is nature always in one mood throughout this grim district. It comprises snow-capped and lofty mountains and dark and gloomy valleys. There are swift-flowing rivers which dash through jagged canyons, and there are enormous plains which in winter are white with snow, and in summer are grey with a saline alkali dust. They all preserve, however, the common characteristics of barrenness, inhospitality, and misery. There are no inhabitants of this land of despair. A band of Pawnees or of Blackfeet may occasionally traverse it in order to reach other hunting grounds, but the hardiest of the braves are glad to lose sight of those awesome plains and to find themselves once more upon their prairies. The coyote skulks among the scrub, the buzzard flaps heavily through the air, and the clumsy grizzly bear lumbers through the dark ravines and picks up such sustenance as it can among the rocks. These are the sole dwellers in the wilderness. In the whole world there can be no more dreary view than that from the northern slope of the Sierra Blanco. As far as the eye can reach stretches the great flat plain land, all dusted over with patches of alkali and intersected by clumps of the dwarfish chaparral bushes. On the extreme verge of the horizon lie a long chain of mountain peaks with their rugged summits flecked with snow. In this great stretch of country there is no sign of life, nor of anything appertaining to life. There is no bird in the steel-blue heaven, no movement upon the dull grey earth. Above all, there is absolute silence. Listen as one may, there is no shadow of a sound in all that mighty wilderness, nothing but silence, complete and heart-subduing silence. It has been said, there is nothing appertaining to life upon the broad plain. That is hardly true. Looking down from the Sierra Blanco, one sees a pathway traced out across the desert, which winds away and is lost in the extreme distance. It is rutted with wheels and trodden down by the feet of many adventurers. Here and there are scattered white objects which glisten in the sun and stand out against the dull deposit of alkali. Approach and examine them. They are bones, some large and coarse, others smaller and more delicate. The former have belonged to oxen, and the latter to man. For 1,500 miles one may trace this ghastly caravan route by these scattered remains of those who had fallen by the wayside. Looking down on this very scene, there stood upon the 4th of May, 1847, a solitary traveller. His appearance was such that he might have been the very genius or demon of the region, and observer would have found it difficult to say whether he was nearer to 40 or to 60. His face was lean and haggard, and the brown parchment-like skin was drawn tightly over the projecting bones. His long brown hair and beard were all flecked and dashed with white. His eyes were sunken in his head and burned with an unnatural lustre, while the hand which grasped his rifle was hardly more fleshy than that of a skeleton. As he stood, he leaned upon his weapon for support, and yet his tall figure and the massive framework of his bones suggested a wiry and vigorous constitution. His gaunt face, however, and his clothes, which hung so baggily over his shriveled limbs, proclaimed that it was that gave him that senile and decrepit appearance. The man was dying from hunger and from thirst. He had toiled painfully down the ravine, and to his little... He had toiled painfully down the ravine and on to this little elevation, in the vain hope of seeing some signs of water. Now the great salt plain stretched before his eyes, and the distant belt of savage mountains, without a sign anywhere of plant or tree which might indicate the presence of moisture. In all that broad landscape there was no gleam of hope. North and east and west he looked with wild, questioning eyes, and then he realized that his wanderings had come to an end, and that there, on that barren crag, he was about to die. Why not here, as well as in a feather bed 20 years hence? He muttered, as he seated himself in the shelter of a boulder. Before sitting down, he had deposited upon the ground his useless rifle, and also a large bundle tied up in a grey shawl which he had carried slung over his right shoulder. It appeared to be somewhat too heavy for his strength, for in lowering it, it came down on the ground with some little violence. Instantly there broke from the grey parcel a little moaning cry, and from it there protruded a small scared face with very bright brown eyes and 2 little speckled, dimpled fists. "You've hurt me," said a childish voice reproachfully. "Have I, though?" the man answered penitently. "I didn't go for to do it." As he spoke, he unwrapped the grey shawl and extricated a pretty little girl of about 5 years of age, whose dainty shoes and smart pink frock, with its little linen apron, all bespoke a mother's care. The child was pale and wan, but her healthy arms and legs showed that she had suffered less than her companion. "How is it now?" he answered anxiously, for she was still rubbing the tosy golden curls which covered the back of her head. "Kiss it and make it well," she said with perfect gravity, shoving the injured part up to him. "That's what Mother used to do. Where's Mother?" "Mother's gone. I guess you'll see her before long." "Gone, eh?" said the little girl, Funny, she didn't say goodbye. She most always did if she was just going over to Auntie's for tea, and now she's been away 3 days. Say, it's awful dry, ain't it? Ain't there no water nor nothing to eat?
No, there ain't nothing, dearie. You'll just need to be patient a while, and then you'll be all right. Put your head up again me, like that, and then you'll feel bullier. It ain't easy to talk when your lips is like leather, but I guess I'd best let you know how the cards lie. What's that you've got?
Pretty little things, fine things, cried the little girl enthusiastically, holding up 2 glittering fragments of mica. When we goes back to home, I'll give them to Brother Bob.
You'll see prettier things than them soon, said the man confidently. You just wait a bit. I was going to tell you, though, you remember me when we left. You remember when we left the river?
Oh, yes.
Well, we reckoned we'd strike another river soon, you see, but there was something wrong. Compasses or map or something, and it didn't turn up. Water ran out, just except a little drop for the likes of you and
you couldn't wash yourself, interrupted his companion gravely, staring up at his grimy visage.
No, nor drink, and Mr. Bender, he was the first to go, and then Indian Pete, and then Mrs. McGregor, and then Johnny Hones, and then dearie your mother.
Then mother's a deader too, cried the little girl, dropping her face in her pinafore and sobbing bitterly.
Yes, they all went except you and me. Then I thought there was some chance of water in this direction, so I heaved you over my shoulder and we tramped it together. I don't seem as though we've improved matters. There's an almighty small chance for us now.
Do you mean that we're going to die too? Asked the child, checking her sobs and raising her tear-stained face.
I guess that's about the size of it.
Why didn't you say so before? She said, laughing gleefully. You gave me such a fright. Why, of course, now as long as we die, we'll be with Mother again.
Yes, you will, dearie.
And you too. I'll tell her how awfully good you've been. I'll bet she meets us at the door of heaven with a big pitcher of water and a lot of buckwheat cakes, hot and toasted on both sides like Bob and me was fond of. How long will it be first?
I don't know. Not very long.
The man's eyes were fixed upon the northern horizon. In the blue vault of the heaven there had appeared 3 little specks, which increased in size every moment, so rapidly did they approach. They speedily resolved themselves into 3 large brown birds, which circled over the heads of the 2 wanderers, and then settled upon some rocks which overlooked them. They were buzzards, the vultures of the west, whose coming is the forerunner of death. Cocks and hens, cried the little girl gleefully, pointing at their ill-omened forms and clapping her hands to make them rise. Say, did God make this country?
In course he did, said her companion, rather startled by this unexpected question.
He made the country down in Illinois, and he made the Missouri, the little girl continued. I guess somebody else made the country in these parts. It's not nearly so well done. They forgot the water and the trees.
What would you think of offering a prayer? The man asked diffidently.
It ain't night yet, she answered.
It don't matter. It ain't quite regular, but he won't mind that, you bet. You say over them once that you used to say every night in the wagon when we was on the plains."
"Why don't you say some yourself?" the child asked, with wondering eyes.
"I disremember them," he answered. "I hain't said none since I was half the height of that gun. I guess it's never too late. You say them out, and I'll stand by and come in on the choruses."
"Then you'll need to kneel down, and me too," she said, laying the shawl out for that purpose. "You've got to put your hands up like this. It makes you feel kind of good." It was a strange sight, had there been anything but the buzzards to see it. Side by side on the narrow shawl knelt the two wanderers, the little prattling child and the reckless, hardened adventurer. Her chubby face and his haggard, angular visage were both turned up to the cloudless heaven in heartfelt entreaty to that dread being with whom they were face to face, while the two voices, the one thin and clear, the other deep and harsh, united in the entreaty for mercy and forgiveness. The prayer finished, they resumed their seat in the shadow of the boulder until the child fell asleep, nestling upon the broad breast of her protector. He watched over her slumber for some time, but nature proved to be too strong for him. For 3 days and 3 nights he had allowed himself neither rest nor repose. Slowly the eyelids drooped over the tired eyes, and the head sunk lower and lower upon the breast, until the man's grizzled beard was mixed with the gold tresses of his companion, and both slept the same deep and dreamless slumber. So I'm going to stop here now. Bye-bye till next time with the next part of this chapter.